Yes, this is the moment I've been waiting for. All throughout Egghead, Bonney and Kuma's inclusion to the story has been my driving interest for this arc. From the reveal of Bonnie's connection and hatred for Vegapunk, to seeing Kuma's flashback, the revelation of how her powers work, Kuma's final journey to protect his daughter, Saturn's manipulation of both of their lives, and her finally confirming with her own eyes that Nikka is real, all of that has been slowly leading to this gigantic payoff. I honestly didn't think anything from this arc would get me more hyped up than that extremely satisfying punch Kuma landed on Saturn back in 1104, but Oda proceeded to say, hold my beer, and decided to drop one more banger before shuffling us off into the ending of this arc. And make no mistake, even with this huge last minute reveal, we are still quickly approaching the end of this arc. But now we're going out with one last bang. And speaking of bangs, or in this case a bump, when Luffy reactivates Gear 5 in this chapter, the bumping of his heart causes the ocean to shake and turns into a beat that the giants end up dancing to. It's a fun little moment and a reminder of how the transformation affects others and his surroundings. But anyway, we now have 2 sun gods up against 4 of the 5 elders. Well, really only one, Mars, because he's the only one that can actually fly. Or at least as far as we're aware he is, and given that Luffy and Bonnie's group have already set sail off the island, it makes it much harder for the other 3 to follow. Now, this is just pure speculation, we'll have to wait until the next chapter to be 100% sure, but if the others don't follow behind a giant ship in their yokai forms, then we should take this as official confirmation that they are in fact Zoan Devil Fruit users and not actual demons. You know, with the whole weakness to seawater being a thing, and the most likely reason why Mars is the only one attacking. Which, dude, this makes things so much easier for the crew. Bonnie's already dealt with the 2 biggest threats amongst the Marines, Vice Admirals Doll and Bluegrass, which, by the way, I was not ready for baby Bluegrass to be that adorable. Doll looks mostly the same, just like a chibi version of herself, but Bluegrass looks straight up like one of those nerdy friend characters you see in more kid-targeted anime, like Beyblade or Yokai Watch. But anyway, with those 2 out of commission, there goes about 80% of the Marines' effectiveness, because in reality, they were doing most of the heavy lifting, which means all our 2 sun gods have to do now is take out the discount Moltres, and they're home free. I mean, there's still the dread of Venus hunting down Nami's gang aboard the Sunny, but once they blast off, it's going to be pretty difficult for him to be able to stop them. Even if he were to shoot a slash at them like he did with Punk Records, Zoro will most likely block it just like he did when Kaku attacked the Sunny back in the beginning of this arc. And then once they're in the air, the Giants, Luffy, or Bonney will most likely catch them as they're trying to land. The only thing I'm still really questioning is exactly how Zoro and Jimbe plan on getting onto the ship after it takes off. It's not like either of the 2 can fly, and with a giant skeleton centaur standing between them and the ship, it's just, I don't really see how this could possibly end well. I think unfortunately we might be looking at another worst case scenario where for an entire arc, these 2 are separated for the rest of the crew because they just get left behind and have to find their own way away from all this chaos, and then once we're done with Elbaf, they'll reunite and head on to the next adventure. At least if I was the one writing the story, that's most likely what I'd be planning out right now, but this is Oda we're talking about. Even if the situation seems impossible, he'll find a way to write them out of it and still make it make complete sense. If I really had to try and think exactly how Oda plans to get these 2 out of it, my bet is on that Stussy, Kaku, and possibly Lucci ends up helping the 2 escape as they make their own way off the Labo Stratum. Or once the Sunny sets off, the 2 just say, you know what, fuck it, and decide to ignore the giant centaur and jump off the island of clouds, trusting that their captain will see them in time to catch them before they hit the ground. Again, that's just my thinking as to what I think Oda might be thinking or planning for these 2 characters to get away. But again, Oda is definitely cooking up something with them. We just have to sit back and wait to see what he does. But until then, it's about time we address the elephant in the room. Obviously, this chapter has become extremely divisive amongst the fandom, which honestly, it kind of feels like ever since we got into Egghead, almost every other chapter has had this same kind of reaction. And look, I'm not here to tell you how to feel about this chapter. You can love it, you can hate it. It is completely up to you. That is your prerogative. But I am here to tell those of you who call Bonnie's transformation in this chapter an ass-pull that, well, you're completely wrong. There has been a mountain of build-up all throughout Egghead for this very moment happening. And the only way you could have possibly not have seen any of it is if you were reading the chapters blindfolded. I mean, since the very first time we saw Bonney use to store the future on herself in this arc, we knew that she's been trying to use that power to become more like Nikka. This great figure her father would tell her about as a kid because in her mind, becoming like him would bring her closer to reuniting with her dad. But she could never get it right because all she could do was emulate her idea of Nikka. She didn't really have anything to base her transformations on besides a loose belief of what he is based on the stories Kuma told her. A belief that as time went by and she discovered her dad's ultimate fate really began to fade little by little until it eventually became doubt. which is why when she went to punch Saturn, it had absolutely no effect on him. By that point, deep inside, she had already stopped believing in this mythical savior. And that's why Saturn was so insistent on denying her the belief that Nikka even existed, because her powers rely heavily on her imagination and belief of what's possible, and if she doesn't believe that Nikka exists, then it's impossible for her to imagine a future where she had his powers. But once she finally saw Luffy in Gear 5, and the legend her father would tell her about was right in front of her eyes, her belief was completely reignited. That's why, in my opinion, she became so attached to him after that moment, and the two started to form this seemingly brother-sister relationship, because just by being there, he saved her from drowning in the despair that Saturn tried to sink her in, and why she was able to achieve this transformation in this chapter, because if Nikka himself believed that she could be as free as him, then damn right she could. Also, interesting thing to note, if you go back and look at all of Bonnie's transformations prior to this chapter when she was trying to emulate Nikka, all of them have more resemblance to Kuma than they do to Sun God. Mostly because I think in her mind, she was kind of combining the two ideas of her dad and the Sun God Nikka being the same person, simply because in her mind, her dad was already her hero. And again, because Bonney had never seen Nikka before seeing Luffy in Gear 5 during this arc, I think that back when she was a kid, every time her dad would tell her stories about what Nikka could do and who he was, when she would try to imagine what he looked like, the only thing that would pop in her head were pictures of her dad. Now, all that being said, I know there was a lot Luffy had to accomplish and go through to reach this stage, and that it might feel like Bonney has skipped over all that development, but we do gotta remember, Bonnie's journey was emotionally just as hard, if not harder than Luffy's. We just didn't get to see it in real time. For basically their entire lives, Bonney and Kuma have been denied freedom thanks to direct action taken by the Gorosei. But right here, in this moment, Bonney not only has a chance to finally save her dad, but to give them both the freedom they've always wanted. And in my opinion, that alone is enough reason for her to finally earn this transformation. Now, to be fair, I completely understand how those of you who are already borderline on whether or not they liked Gear 5 to begin with, upset that there's now 2 of them. Even I'll be a bit disappointed if there's not at least some kind of time limit on how long she can hold this transformation. But we all do have to sit down and agree that this was essentially what Bonnie's entire journey, this entire arc has been building up to. And I am personally looking forward to seeing her in action in the next chapter. I'm just hoping that somehow, some way, before she loses this transformation, that she gets to get one clean hit on Saturn for everything he's done to her and her entire family. Now, last thing worth noting, we do unfortunately see the Iron Giant sinking into the ocean in this chapter. Funnily enough, it ended up landing on some Marines as it was falling, again showing that the Gorosei really have no concern for any of their allies besides, well, each other. But what's interesting is that its dialogue in this chapter almost comes across as if it doesn't even regard the damage it just took from the yokai, solely focused on trying to figure out why it could no longer sense Joy Boy. And then as the chapter ends, it perks back up once it can sense him again, which tells me that we'll see it come back in the upcoming chapters, but something seems weird about all of this. I don't know, maybe I'm reaching, but it kind of feels like Oda is trying to hint at there being something besides just Luffy that's calling out to the giant, because it only senses him again once both Luffy and Bonney are in their Nikka forms. And I keep going back to how it didn't react to Luffy the first 2 times he went into Gear 5 in this arc, but I believe started up again after his 3rd transformation, which happened only after Bonney and Kuma both saw Luffy in Gear 5 and realized that he was the sun god Nikka. And actually, now that I think about it, then the Iron Giant only started moving once the giant pirates showed up on Egghead, which the reason why they came there was in part, obviously to help Luffy out, but also because of the fact that they realized that he was basically the reincarnation of their sun god. To me, it feels like Oda is telling us that the key to whatever is resonating the Iron Giant with Gear 5 is a combination of the form and others' belief in the idea of sun god Nikka. But let me know in the comments down below, what do you think the Iron Giant is sensing that reminds of the Joy Boy, and why it is so drawn to Luffy only in these certain moments. Thank you for watching the video, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.